Hello and welcome to episode number 33 of the Wonder of Stuff Vodcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every weekend. This is the place where you'll find news, information and commentary on science, science, engineering and technology, and from the past week and beyond, anything else that appears in our little brains. My name is John Gardner as ever, and it's not John Gardner as ever. As ever, my name is John Gardner. To help us out on the journey to knowledge, my colleagues are Richard Smith and Ross Davidson. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
Right, I've stuffed that one up quite spectacularly. You wouldn't think I've been doing this for 33 episodes, would you? Anyway, right, we're going to start off on this wonderful humid night in the northeast of England with a topic of planets, Pluto and Mars and Ross.
Yes, planets. Or what is it? That's the question.
Yeah.
So basically,
controversial.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So this is a space probe actually called New Horizons, which is in 2 days going to basically have its closest pass to Pluto. Now this probe was launched in 2006, and it actually. It set the record for the highest launch speed of any human-made object from Earth. So basically, they fired it straight into a trajectory to go and visit a couple of asteroids and then ultimately get to Pluto.
So did they do a slingshot thing?
They went past a couple of places, but it wasn't the slingshot. They sort of sent it out in the direction that Earth was going, and its Earth relative speed was 16.2 kilometers per second. And to put it in perspective, the speed it's going, when it was launched, Apollo astronauts, when they went to the moon, it took them 3 days. New Horizons passed the moon in less than 9 hours. So it was going quite fast.
That's fairly hurtling.
It is, yes. So anyway, yeah, one of its main mission was to go and visit Pluto. Now, Pluto, you may think is a planet, but it's actually not. But you would have remembered it as being classified as one when you went to school. Now, let me just screen share this picture. So this is just a picture here of the orbits of the planets. And what you'll see, Pluto is the one that has the big eccentric orbit. So it's straight away, it's different to the other planets. It doesn't orbit in this nice elliptical plane. It's sort of slightly out there. Now this was discovered in 1930, and like I say, originally it was considered the 9th planet, but fairly soon after that, and ever since, it was sort of a bit in the question whether it was a planet or not. In 1992, they discovered something called the Kuiper Belt, which is effectively it's like an asteroid belt, but it's further out than the asteroid belt, and this is a belt of large objects that are basically in this what's called a trans-Neptunian orbit, so an orbit outside Neptune. And they think there are larger objects than Pluto in there. And in fact, they actually...
have you got the definition of what a planet is and what Pluto now falls into?
Well, the definition of a planet is fairly simple. It's got to be round, it's got to orbit the sun, but the last part of it has to clear everything in its orbit. And this is the bit where Pluto sort of fails because of this Kuiper Belt, because there's lots of other things around it.
So Pluto passes through the Kuiper Belt?
It's part of the Kuiper Belt, yeah. So basically, if it hasn't sort of got all of the matter in its particular orbit to a certain distance, all into the one sort of round body, it's dubious whether it's a planet.
Right.
So yeah, in 2005, they actually discovered an object which is called Eris, which is actually 27% bigger than Pluto, and more massive than Pluto. And that was when they decided to sort of formally define the term planet, and they declassified Pluto. So it's a dwarf planet, or a Plutoid.
So is Pluto at higher risk of colliding with something because of that, or is there such big gaps in the Kuiper Belt that that's probably still not going to happen?
Probably still not going to happen, but yeah, there's a lot more there. I mean, in terms of the New Horizons probe, we've never sent a probe to Pluto. In fact, we've never had any good photos of Pluto either. If I just get another picture of Pluto.
And is that just because it's it's the furthest away from the sun, and
it's just
it's
so
just
far
a
away.
long.
Yeah. So if I just share this picture here, these are pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope of Pluto, and these are the best quality images we had of Pluto. So you can sort of see that it's obviously got some
That's fairly poor.
interesting features on it. Get a general idea of its color. So it's Pluto's actually smaller than the Moon. So the Moon's something like 1,700 kilometers in diameter. This is 1,100 kilometers, so it's smaller than the Moon, much smaller. Yet obviously we were always told that it was a planet. It was the 9th planet. So anyway, New Horizons is taking photos now, and if I share another picture, this is the latest picture I found.
So you could classify it. You could classify it in as a planet, but then you'd have to open the door up to.
Exactly. Yeah. There's going to be so many more planets that they think. Obviously, Eris is one they found. They think they're going to find a lot more as they continue to look. So this photo here is from a couple of days ago, I think.
So the first thing I would think is yes, it looks very moon-like. There's craters everywhere. What's all of that? Well, it's obviously a monochrome image, but what are the dark patches?
Well, it's just one of the interesting features that there's these sort of 4 dark patches at the bottom, which are sort of regular spaced, which they're going to get better images of and see exactly what geological process has actually formed them. I think this is actually the effectively the dark side of Pluto, because
it doesn't make a good album title.
The dark side. When New Horizons has its closest pass, it's going to be looking at the other side, and then by the time it goes past it, this side of the planet that will rotate it will be on the other side of the sun, obviously with the probe as well. So they're not going to get very good photos of it. So this is going to be the best picture they've got of this particular side of Pluto. But it's July the 14th. It's going to have an actual flyby, and it is going to fly by. It's going to go past it, like 4 kilometers a second or something. It's not going to go into orbit or anything like that.
So that's Tuesday.
Yep.
Have you got the exact time, UTC time, or?
It's just going to happen on July the 14th, as far as I know. I mean,
Right.
obviously they'll be taking photos through that whole sort of flyby, and obviously they want to look at all sorts of things. Obviously what does it look like? As usual with these sort of probes, they've got lots of instruments on them to measure the atmosphere, measure the temperature, that sort of thing. Find out if there's any large structures on there. Obviously, if you think when they first sent probes to Mars, they found things like dry riverbeds and stuff that they weren't expecting, and they went to Jupiter, they found the moons that had volcanic activity. So who knows what they might find there.
So do we know how close it's going to get to the surface?
I don't know, actually. No, I don't have that information on me, I'm afraid.
That's okay. And do we know anything about when was it launched?
It was launched in I've got that.
This is what I'm normally like when Richard's query
It was
is.
launched in 2006. So I mean, this is one of the interesting things about it. When it was launched, Pluto was a planet. But by the time it's arrived there, it's no longer a planet.
So they should have a reasonable resolution camera on board, because CCD technology was fairly okay in 2006.
Yeah, so they should get some really good photos. Another interesting thing about the New Horizons, Pluto was actually discovered by an astronomer called Clyde W. Tombaugh. He's unfortunately not with us anymore, but a part of his ashes are actually on the probe.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
The first human remains to leave the solar system are on board this probe.
Oh,
quite cool.
So that's quite cool.
And after I realise I'm probably asking you questions that that only NASA would probably know. But so it goes in a is it going in an orbit around Pluto? Or is it just passing and then going straight out?
It's just a flyby. It's going far too fast.
Right.
The amount of energy to slow it down to get into an orbit, it doesn't have that.
So you really only have one chance of getting some decent photos, and then it's off into the outside of the
and that was one thing I didn't get the chance to look up as to what its post sort of Pluto plans are, whether they're going to go and. I suspect what they're doing is obviously, like I say, the Kuiper belt is they suspect there's lots of other large objects in there, so I suspect it's just going to go and try and find, see what else it can measure in that area of space.
Have you got the photo back? The diagram that you had before.
Yeah.
Because there was there was just a query about the Kuiper belt, because on there is. I'll just talk a minute, Ross, so it comes back up.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So you've got the asteroid belt here.
But that's not the Kuiper belt.
No, the Kuiper belt's it's like an asteroid belt, but there's much bigger bits in it.
Right. Okay. That's all I wanted to clear up.
Yeah. So it's sort of like it's like effectively the remnants of the creation of our solar system. It's all the stuff that was left over when most of the planets were formed.
And is that I'm just trying to get, is that sort of between Pluto and Neptune, or is it?
It's sort of basically, past Neptune, so around where Pluto's orbit is. That's where the Kuiper belt is.
Cool. So are NASA TV going to run it live?
I'm not sure if they're going to do any live, because I think it's one of these things where obviously it's that far out. It's going to take, I don't know.
Pictures coming back, and then they'll be processing.
Yeah,
and then
half an
there'll be
hour,
colorization and various stuff.
Yeah, they'll have to put it together. So there's not going to be any video footage or anything like that.
No, but I see a lot of that. I quite enjoyed just seeing the mission control.
Mm-hmm.
Get very excited about things. That's part of, for me, that's part of the excitement.
When you see them huddled around a screen,
and going
watching it draw line by line, like when you were a kid and you had a Spectrum.
Yeah.
Yes. What if it makes that noise when it colours it in? Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
Tad.
So, like I say, the best photos we should get will be on Tuesday, and it should be quite interesting.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
And the other thing I was going to briefly talk about, if I can move on from that.
You can. I'm allowing
was another object which is still a planet, which is Mars. Now, this is basically, if I said you a marathon on Mars, what would you think?
Something about
chocolate bar from the 70s.
Yeah.
No, this is actually the rover, Opportunity rover, which is still going on Mars. So it was.
Now this is many years after it thought it was going to conk out, isn't it?
Like 12, 11 years or something since it started. So obviously it's. I think we mentioned this before. Its initial mission was only 90 days, but it's still going. And last Tuesday, I think it was, it completed its marathon. So it's travelled 26.2 miles on Mars. And its finishing time was roughly 11 years and 2 months. So, it's not going to break any records. But if I just my last photo of the day.
On the speed that that flyby is going to be past Pluto, that could do it in what, 13 seconds or something.
Yeah. So this basically is a photo of Mars. It shows you the full sort of path that it's gone now. So if it started here, Endurance Crater was the first interesting thing it saw. That was actually, I think that was when it went and visited its backplate came off and it went and visited that. Victoria Crater here, and then it went across this massive crater here called Endeavour Crater. And you'll see where it is now. They've named it Marathon Valley. So it's still going, and apart from a couple of times when it's got stuck for a few weeks, its wheels are starting to wear out significantly, but they're going to keep it going for as long as they can.
Well, may as well, really, isn't it? I mean, it's. Are they going to try and go? Well, actually, they're a fair way away from Cydonia in all these regions.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I guess they'll just plot another course and see how far it goes, and so they'll just keep on going and see what they find. But there's a really good video that NASA released, which is a time lapse
So it's a time lapse taking sort of like, a couple of photos every day, and a video of its entire journey so far, which is really interesting. And you see the times where it gets stuck, and its wheels are like properly sort of like about 2/3 dug into basically dust. And like I said, it took them a couple of weeks to get it freed a couple of times. So yeah, quite impressive stuff.
Excellent, good. So a couple of things. One of them to look forward to on Tuesday, which is the flyby of Pluto, and hopefully in the next few weeks we'll find out new trajectories for the rover on Mars. Jolly good. Sounds good. Now, on to the next one, which is from Richard. And the topic that Richard's going to discuss is autopsy in decline. Or autopsies in decline?
Autopsies.
Question mark?
Whichever you prefer. So there was a study last month by Imperial College School of Medicine. And they looked at the rate of autopsy in the UK. It's now less than 1% in autopsies are performed on less than 1% of deaths, and that was down from 40% in 1960 approximately. So they're falling at quite a rapid rate. So they're just looking at, this study was just looking at the rate of decline, wasn't actually looking at what does that mean, is that good, is that bad, blah blah blah. But we're free on this show to speculate, so I've done a bit of speculating. Just a bit more background. Autopsy, the reason you do an autopsy is to diagnose the cause of death. It's still regarded as the most accurate way of diagnosing the cause of death, and also, often it's good at identifying the path of an illness up to death as well. In medical school now, you can go through your entire 6 years of training, medicine training, without seeing an autopsy performed. So it's no longer part of the training. They looked at deaths in hospitals. They're only performing, on average now, an autopsy in 0.69% of patient deaths that occur in hospitals. And a quarter of trusts have now completely stopped performing the practice altogether. And they believe, that the authors of this report believe, that the decline is at a rate that they'll disappear altogether within 20 years.
So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that, rightly or wrongly, I'm believing that coroners only do autopsies if there is some sort of question about the manner of death. Is that not true?
Yeah.
Has that always been like that?
You have two definitions. I haven't written them down. Clinical is where the hospital orders it, and then there's a governance type one where it meets a criteria by law. That there's a Scottish one and there's a non-Scottish UK one where if it meets this criteria, it must be performed.
Right. So yeah. And also, I'm going to speculate that one of the reasons why the autopsies are getting less is because there's simply less money for coroners. There aren't as many coroners. It'll
be that, but it's also the belief that modern MRI and CT scanning techniques mean that because they're so accurate at diagnosing illness, or that at least they're much more accurate than ever before, there is a belief in the medical community that there's no need for the autopsy because those methods...
You know what killed them.
Yeah. So people are getting diagnosed more accurately.
Yeah.
So therefore, when they finally die of that illness, they already know in advance.
Yeah.
Will it also be a sort of a side effect of the population aging as a whole, sort of people dying at a later age? And if you die sort of suddenly at 95, even if you didn't have a diagnosed illness, it's not going to be unexplained because you're just going to be up to 95.
Yeah.
So sort of the older you are, the less likely people are going to be like, I wonder what killed them.
Yeah. Definitely, that'll be a factor as well.
So if I had an old person who had an illness, I could bump them off quite quickly, and they may never have an autopsy.
Well, yeah.
If it's not an obvious way.
Are you trying to sell out your inheritance, John?
Merely speculation.
Shipman was very aware of that fact and exploited that fact.
That's true. Yeah.
If the rates of autopsy were still 1960s level of 40%, and a percentage of his victims were subjected to autopsy, he would have undoubtedly been caught sooner, and undoubtedly lives would have been saved.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually an interesting point. I was going to say, surely the level of autopsies lowering sounds like a good thing, because it sounds like we know more about why people die. But that is a very good point as well, yeah, because, yeah, joking aside, someone in an old age keel nova, it still might happen, something like that happening still might deprive someone of 10, 15 years of good life, so, yeah.
Well, on the subject of what you raised there first, you might think that. However, if you look at the rate of lawsuits for wrongful death and medical malpractice and blah blah blah, there's still an awful lot of that goes on. So, these methods, CT scans and MRI scans, are much better than we had before. I mean, if you go far enough, if you go more than 100 years back, it's kind of finger in the air. Well, we don't know, unless we cut them open, we don't have a clue what happened there. And then you cut them open, you find out they're riddled with something, which you can't do until that. And of course, you can do that a lot more now, so it reduces the need for that. But a separate study that I looked up, US study on autopsies of 86 people who had succumbed to cancer, who died of cancer. A quarter of them had major misdiagnoses, and half of those would likely have recovered, or received a different course, wouldn't have recovered. They would have received a different course of treatment had their medical condition been correctly diagnosed in the first place. So a quarter of them had major misdiagnosed diseases on top of the cancer that would have either been complicating factors or just independent factors, which, if they'd received treatment, it would have made a difference of some kind. Yeah. So that's still a big number to be missing out on. And if you don't have an autopsy, the reason that I find it interesting is the scientific method. You want a checking mechanism. You want a mechanism to say, okay, we're using MRI and CT and we're increasing the rates of diagnosis. Are we, though?
You're right.
Are we? Because otherwise you're just guessing that the CT scan is doing its job. Is it? I mean, okay, more people are being saved, but there's so many confounding factors. There's no way to say it's that. Yes, you're picking up this, you're picking up this illness a lot better. Unless you're performing autopsies, you're not really checking that it's catching everything that it should be catching.
In terms of autopsy, when I imagine an autopsy, all I can think of is like something from the 40s and 50s, where they do just cut open a body, weigh all of the insides, and cover them with a white sheet. But I assume technology used for autopsies has gone on a long way. Is it still sort of like...
Have you not seen Prime Suspect?
I don't watch Prime Suspect. But is it still the same? Like,
it's an umbrella term. It can mean that, and it can mean... But generally, there would be some... because it's so easy to open a body up once the person's passed away, then clearly you're going to go down that road, aren't you? Because it's just much easier. The reason that you use less intrusive methods
they're still alive.
When they're still alive is that it could cause damage by doing it. So it's, you're obviously going to go route one. Once the person's dead, you've got a limited amount of time to find out. You don't want to spend too long on it anyway, so you just go route one and open them up, I suspect.
And I would also suspect that that a lot of autopsies is to do with toxicology now, and blood. You can learn a lot more than we ever have before, just taking a sample of blood.
Yeah.
Would an autopsy not effectively be sort of done on people who were like donors? Like if you were a donor and you donated your heart or something. When they extracted the heart, would they not take the opportunity to have a bit of a rummage around and see if there's anything?
They would take
a
cursory glance, but obviously, like the NHS, it's tightly budgeted and controlled. Yeah. So if your job is to get through 10 cadavers and do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to go, oh wow, well while I'm here, I'll spend a couple of hours looking at this that I'm not remitted to look at. If you're not remitted to look at it, you're not going to look at it. So suspect not.
It's like when the water board come and replace a pipe, and then 3 weeks later someone else digs up the road, and you just think, could have just done it at the same time, couldn't you?
Yeah. But yeah, the other aspects that you could be missing out on is obviously emergent diseases springs to mind. This wasn't written down in the report. I'm kind of just speculating myself now, but also seeing how, when you're saying about very elderly people, and I'm sure you're right that you just wouldn't bother. But then, are we missing out on learning more about Alzheimer's, more about sort of neural decline? And because we're not performing the autopsies, is that a treasure trove of information that we're missing out on?
Mhm.
And also just for, like I was saying, that what was the figure? 6 years of medical training without seeing one. Is that not, why did we deem that such an important thing? Even though those people weren't going to perform post-mortem as part of their job, they still received that as part of their general medical training. And now all of a sudden we're not doing it for some external reason. Seems as though we're missing out there as well.
What were the numbers again? You said it's gone down from 40% in the 60s.
40% in the 60s to less than 1% a day.
Less than 1% a day.
And at the current rate of decline, it'll be gone altogether within 20 years.
I mean, it's one of those things where I suppose gone altogether. They don't mean they'll never do one. They just mean it'll not be a routine thing anymore. Extreme circumstances they'll do one. Yeah.
I mean, one of the autopsies, which is probably quite famous now, is that of Alexander Litvinenko, who was the Russian spy who got polonium poisoned in a bar in London. There were 3 coroners all for that autopsy because it was obviously very important.
Yeah.
And the Litvinenko, their family had one of her own doctors on, so it's obviously still used, and you obviously can get some really good accurate information from doing it, because I think at the time they knew there was radioactive poisoning, but they didn't know what, but they were able to find exactly the element that they were poisoned with.
Did they agree that he was poked with an umbrella, or do they still not know what it was? So that was the theory, wasn't it? That he'd been...
Was it not fired? Was it not a pellet fired at the end of an umbrella?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I thought that it was put in liquid.
Mm.
I thought it was put in tea. They were having tea.
Surely it tastes polonium in your tea.
It has that unique citrus taste with a floral undertone.
I assume you only need a small amount.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, that was it really. And the only other point that I wanted to make was that could it. I mean, this study itself calls for follow-up studies to see what the effects are, but it makes alludes to various possibilities. And one of them is misallocation of resources due to incorrect death statistics. So in the distant past, or well, not even the distant past, but in the past, you used to get just cause of death was old age. And of course, we've refined that now we know, but then you wonder now, okay, the cause of death is the cancer. Is it? Because in that American study, a quarter of them had major illnesses that weren't diagnosed. Were they actually dying of the cancer? So it might be very misleading when you say, oh, well, a third of Britons die of cancer, or 2/3 of Britons die of cancer. If it's a quarter of them, that's wrong. That's not even a true stat. So when you're determining how much money to put into research, how much money to put into whatever aspects of the care and blah, 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 you want to apportion that correctly, don't you? You don't want to be putting it in, at least you want to be basing it on correct information, how you do it.
Reliable stats.
Which,
excellent.
If you stop doing autopsies, you're not going to get as reliable stats, basically, and that's a fact.
Is it the same decline in America as over here?
Yeah, all the countries that they looked at the US and France and a few other.
It's obviously why it's declined in America, because Quincy's dead. So there you go.
So yeah, it seems to be more of a product of, regardless whether healthcare is private or public, it's less of a product of what John was saying of, is it just that the tightening budgets and coroners and blah, blah, blah. It seems to be more of a product of a modern attitude of, well, we've got CT scanners, we've got MRI scanners. We know, the medical community knows how people have died. And to me, that's not a very scientific sounding thing to say. So that's where it starts to stray into, it's its own sort of, it's its own community that's outside of science, and that's where it gets a bit dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Much postulation. I wonder if there is some stats out there that can actually start defining why. I mean those stats are great, to tell you that there's a downward decline. But I wonder if there is an equal report in there. Although I would guess it would probably within the individual health authorities that would have more information about the individual, why their coroners. They're not using
the fact that 1 in 4 trusts have decided to get rid of them altogether tells you that it's a policy change that's happening. That obviously there's an attitude towards them that they're thinking, well, we're not even keeping them for special circumstances. We're not going to do them. We're not going to do them at all.
So if they did need a coroner, they'd have to go to another neighbouring trust, I guess.
I mean, presumably. I mean, this is talking about people who die in hospital there.
Yeah.
Presumably, if they died suspiciously, the police would get involved, and then the police coroner would be involved.
Yeah.
So it's just the hospitals. The trust itself is not employing a coroner to do. Oh, we're not quite sure what happened here, or why he died so rapidly after he was diagnosed.
Yeah, but if they need one, one would presume that they would still have to get one in. It's in some cases, even though the cases would have reduced dramatically. So it's obviously cheaper for them to purchase the services of a coroner from a neighbouring trust for the amount of times that they're actually going to use it.
Yeah. So out of those, the two, what was it, clinical and governance?
Yeah.
So the clinical one, they're basically saying it's just no longer needed, but the other one would still remain for those special circumstances.
You're awfully obliged if the person, if the police are involved, then clearly it's going to have to go.
Yeah.
Or I guess there'll be more to it than that. Just if they're under a certain age threshold, and like you're saying, if they're not diagnosed or anything, they suddenly die, probably you've just kind of got to have one in that circumstance.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good postulation. Yes. Right. Well, on to the last subject for this evening, and this is mine. And I want you all to cast your minds back many hundreds of years, even before I was born. So we're talking in the 1700s and the 1800s, and possibly in the 1600s as well, when all of the population of this country and all other countries over the world were starting to explore the great planet and building great ships and finding new lands and doing business deals with other people, trading, building clippers, getting tea around, and furniture and whatever. And it was very expensive to do all this. It was slow and expensive. And it was slow because, you had just ships with sails on. But expensive because when you put all this stuff on a ship, you had to unpack it all at the other end. And there were all strange shapes and, barrels and all boxes and crates and all different sizes. And this carried on all the way through until the 1950s, when some great spark in America who had a transportation company thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just whack everything in a box on this wagon and then go to the ship and just lift off that box? And hence containerization was born. And it was great because everybody could shove everything into a box of the same size. You could put it on any ship, and you could make the box, because they're all of a standard design, anywhere in the world, and they would all fit. People who run shipping lines could work out that this ship takes 500 shipping containers, this one takes 1,000, and you'd know when you were full, because they're all the same size. Now, take that analogy and put it in space. So I'm going to talk about the CubeSats. Now, we've touched on these before, and it was in relation to when the Planetary Society were releasing their light sail, and that was a CubeSat project. And I know Ross said at the time, "Oh, CubeSats, they sound interesting." So I thought I would do a bit on CubeSats. Now, the idea behind a CubeSat, which is the same thing as a containerization on ship, it's a way of putting space projects, small satellites, in a standardized box, and these boxes could be put in to specific launches where there's just a launch full of CubeSats, or pack out the excess space around a larger, sort of more important launch. So like a big, like if they were going to launch something like the Hubble telescope, there would be space in the payload to put some of these little CubeSats. I'll tell you what they are and tell you the bit behind them. So there's sort of there's two starting points, if you would. NASA say that it came from their policy to try in the late 90s to try and commoditize space exploration and to make it cheaper and to make it more available to other organizations, private sector organizations, and get more research done in space. But as far as I know, it actually started, certainly the CubeSat and some of the dimensions that are now taken as a CubeSat, official CubeSat, started from a joint Caltech Stanford University project. They were investigating. Well, first off, it was an educational tool. So their students, they were trying to get a launching device made for launching satellites and other research sort of equipment into space, into low Earth orbit, and they came. And this is how it all started. So it started. They didn't try to find all really complicated launching equipment, and they came to the point that if you had a standard small size box where you could put all the research and satellite stuff in there, all the electronics, they could essentially just launch it from a spring-loaded platform and essentially jettison them out. So they came to this sort of CubeSat dimension, which is a 10 by 10 by 10, so 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters cubed, and this is how it all started. The idea behind them is it uses COTS electronics, so off the shelf electronics. They can reduce the cost of deployment. So that I don't know how much an average NASA project costs, but these cost somewhere in the region of $65,000 to $80,000 US dollars to do, which is a hell of a lot cheaper than anything that NASA's done. So the idea is to reduce the cost of deployment. You'll be able to launch multiple projects at the same time because they're all linked up like that. You can fire them all off into low Earth orbit. And it, like I said, it uses excess capacity in larger launch vehicles. The way that it does it is that like I said, there's a 10 by 10 by 10. That's your standard box, and that's a 1U CubeSat, and they're scalable across the axes. So if you say you want a 2U, which is a 20 by 10 by 10, or 3U, which is a 30 by 10 by 10. So you can do that in one axis only. You can extend them, so you can make them bigger. Obviously,
I was going to say in one axis only, otherwise it's going to quickly become a very complex game of Tetris.
Yes. Yeah, 30 by 30 by 30. No, it doesn't.
An L-shaped one here and a T. And
but also, it's dead easy for the launch vehicle manufacturers to work out how much space they've got. It's dead easy to work out how much weight they've got in the payload, because what I didn't say here, it's called a pico satellite, which is of a maximum of weight of 1 kilogram. So it's dead easy. So it's just metric heaven, really. It's 10 by 10 by 10, and it's 1 kilogram in size. Well, great. The maths are dead easy.
So in terms of the launch vehicles, is there any particular? There could be any size rocket, really, can't there? You say we can allocate 100 CubeSats to this launch, or 1,000. Yeah.
That's it. With there were smaller. The Russians were the first ones. The Russians thought, hey up, this is a way to get a bit of cash. So they were the first ones. But there's been loads of them. The Japanese launched one. I don't know whether China have done any yet, but there's been various space agencies. ESA have done some. So there's and they fit so well in the cargo hold.
Yeah, I mean it's a great idea, because, like you say, that sort of level of cost you're talking about, where it's like in the tens of thousands of pounds.
I mean, that's, somebody would buy a car for that.
Yeah, but that, in terms of sort of like, if you think of like, university projects and stuff like that, it's the sort of level that they will be able to do. So you will actually have education institutes sending up proper, not just sending stuff up on balloons, which they've done for years, but actually getting things into low Earth orbit. I think that's what it is.
Absolutely. Well, I'll give you some stats. So the first CubeSat, as we know, there were some trials of various sizes that went up before that. But the first CubeSat meeting those criteria of the 10 by 10 by 10 unit, it was back in 2003, and amazingly, it was at Stanford University. So they obviously were in at the start. So they got the first one up, and it was an earthquake detection satellite, and it's still up there. It's still working. Yeah. The second one was a Japanese one, which I've actually got it here. I'll just share it out. And that there was for, hang on one moment. Yeah. So that one is also still up there, and what you can see here is a standard sort of setup. The way it is, because of the cube's sort of setup, you've got solar panels on all sides. Mm-hmm. Obviously, one side there is some connection. There's connectivity here. I don't know whether these are actually the ones that were in space, because I don't know whether you would want an RJ45.
What's going to plug into it?
Probably like an RJ45.
But these are the antenna. This is sort of a dipole, UHF, VHF antenna. The pieces of metal that come out. But that's a fairly typical one, although I think that one's the early one that they had. And what happens is these flip out, so these sides flip out, and give you the sort of standard cross. As you would on a satellite, when the solar panels come out, you get the cross towards the sun. That's all done from the sides; they all flip out.
My only concern about this is obviously, is there any indication in terms of like a particular launch how many CubeSats you would have? Like, would it be tens?
Well, since 2003, there has only been 75 launches.
But how many of the actual cubes would you get in there? Because I'm just thinking, if you had like one, usually you think of like a launch of a satellite, it would be like a satellite and potentially something else. If you're going to send something up and send out like 20 satellites,
they were designed for launching multiple satellites at the same time.
Yeah.
But there is always a problem, because the fact is, because they're a very low cost of getting such research projects into space, and because the people who are doing them are nominally, let's just say, well, they're students essentially. They may be postgrad students, but they're still haven't had the years of experience as somebody who generally works in NASA and is involved with getting satellites in that sort of environment. So what happens is there's inevitably some learning process there, and what happened with one launch was that they used there was two CubeSats being launched at the same time from different universities, and they used magnets to get the Earth's magnetic poles, so they could sort of navigate in some way. But they used such a strong magnet that actually, when they were launched, they actually stuck together.
Yeah, they haven't thought that through, have they?
No. So
but yeah, I mean, that's the danger. Thinking like, I don't know what the launch mechanism would be if you had lots. I'm assuming you would let them out one at a time. But what if the first one going out got stuck? All of the ones behind us,
Yeah, well, I'm presuming
there'll be a lot of challenges.
They're obviously using the spring-loaded. They're obviously using the spring-loaded mechanism. I'm guessing this is what I'd like to see. If I open it up, I go, "Oh yeah, that's exactly how I would do it." Just a big cartridge mechanism where you've got a big feed in, and the first one comes out and goes like that, and then the next one goes along, and it's like chocolate bars. As you pull them down, the next one drops down. But I don't know.
I suppose if they have like a launch mechanism on it, each one of them will know its own particular orbit and stuff, so they will be sent out in different directions, and like I say, probably at different heights as well. So the chances of them sort of colliding or interfering with each other will be very small. But yeah, there's a lot more things to go wrong if you're launching multiple things at the same time. And like you say, especially if they're not going to be, if they're not worth millions and millions, so that every measurement's like micrometers perfect. If they're worth like 80,000, so there's a chance that it might be a bit wonky.
Yeah.
There's a lot more can go wrong.
There is. There's also been questions because you're bringing the price point down from actually getting this sort of stuff into space, and because there's a lot less. There's people from universities working on them, getting them up there. There's been a criticism that is a way just to increase exponentially space junk.
Yeah.
Because you'll just have all these little boxes all over the place.
But I imagine smaller satellites will have a much shorter lifetime because they'll not have much, that much fuel to recorrect their orbits. So
the main is solar. They've all got lithium-ion batteries on. So essentially, what you have in your phone. So there is obviously a finite life. But then you look at these, of the original ones, there's that Stanford University earthquake detection. That's still active. That was launched in June 2003. There's a satellite from Tokyo Institute of Technology for amateur radio and users. That's still active. That was launched in the same launch. So there you go. There's three there that were launched at the same time. Mm-hmm. And there's another one from University of Tokyo, and then they had a big spate of failed ones. I don't know what happened there, but they all seem to be around. They were all failed or destroyed. I think one of them was. You remember when they had a spate of ESA rockets blowing up? I think that was. There was a huge slope of 1U ones that all got destroyed. So Delft University in Netherlands. University of Aalborg in Denmark, they've all had launches. Berlin, Sweden.
Looking at a thing here saying there's a plan to launch 50 at a time in February. Oh no, when was that? Yeah, February 2016.
Well, there's the next, the last ones that this, and I didn't see any information about this, but I've got this on the CubeSat.org website. It tells you what the next lot of CubeSats that are going to be launched, and there's supposedly one launched by an Atlas V rocket in May the 20th this year, so it's passed. And there was supposed to be 10 being launched. Some of them were U.S. Naval Academy, some of them were California Caltech. And there's actually this is the one with light sail in, so yeah, so it did get launched. So there was 10 launched in that one. So obviously you can do them in mass.
Yeah.
Which is kind of good. There's even a website who basically CubeSatKit.com. They actually give you all the bits that you need the basic frame to put your experiments in. And it gives you a motherboard with an 8-bit computer on it, or a 16-bit computer with an operating system, which is evidently based on Linux in some way. So it's interesting, but how that's interesting in itself. But how I wanted to bring it in to a recent topic is that NASA are now thinking, "Woo, this is a great way of getting stuff out there." And they're planning 2 CubeSats called Marco, and these are going to be the first ones launched out of low Earth orbit, because nobody up until now has any idea of how they are going to react after they go out of low Earth orbit, because they're kind of flimsy. There's a lot of radiation out there, and they're kind of flimsy. They're built to a price point. So there are 15 JPL-funded projects currently involving CubeSats.
So where is that going to go to Mars or something? I assume
Marco, yeah. It's going to. They're all Mars detection.
But I imagine that's more of a proof of concept than anything else, because obviously they're that small and they've got much larger things around Mars with probably bigger, better detectors already. So that'll just be sort of proof of concept that they can do it, I assume.
I guess so. Although they have NASA have released CubeSats before, but again in low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
So this is going to be these will be the first ones that go out of Earth orbit. So I guess a lot of that is just a finger in the air type of thing.
Could this be used as a sort of a way of? Would it make sense? Could these CubeSats become like, when you see these sort of autonomous robot type things that are quite often cubes that build themselves and can reshape themselves? You see them as like sort of rebuildable, self-repairing robots. Could that sort of concept be used in satellites, or would
not for $80,000? They couldn't.
Probably not. Probably better just to build one big one.
It's built right. I think the vast majority of people who are involved in this are hoping that it did for what the 1980s home computer boom did for computer programmers. I'm hoping that they're thinking that this is, if we do this, there'll be enough people that will invest in the future, essentially.
Yeah.
There'll be loads more people interested in space. There'll be loads more science and engineers coming into space exploration, and therefore the possibilities grow exponentially from that. Because obviously, in the 80s, when all these home computers were getting introduced, and we all had the playing games and stuff, there was a huge glut. Out after that, there was loads of people who were in computer science courses. There was programmers, etc., and that's faded away again now since schools aren't teaching that. They're teaching IT, which is how to use Excel, rather than how to code. But luckily, it's starting to come back again. I noticed there's a few people running actual computer science GCSE courses, which is what we had. When I, back in the 80s when I did mine, it was a computing science. We learned about control units, arithmetic logic units, programming, registers, all this stuff. Hopefully this is going to do that. It's going to be the kickstart to get a load of people interested in this.
Yeah.
And therefore, and this type of research, which is, much cheaper than anybody's been able to get involved with before. You can get involved with it without any NASA involvement. You don't have to be part of a national or a global-wide space program. You can do it with your, a university.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's the key, is to get the cost down low enough and it'll explode. Well, hopefully not explode.
Although there was a hell of a lot. There was some CubeSats on that SpaceX rocket that went.
Yeah.
So it's still, even the big boys get it wrong. So I think that's about it for this evening.
Excellent.
That's whizzed through. So anything else, everybody?
No, that's me.
Well, hopefully, can I just have another rant about Google?
Go on.
I cannot believe that. I mean, we use Google Hangouts on air. We've used it since November. It's been it's been okay. It's not been brilliant for broadcasting the way we do, but it's been pretty good. And the fact is that we haven't had to fart around to get everything up onto YouTube. It's just all done automatically. Something has changed in Chrome, either within the plugin for Hangouts or the version of Chrome itself. I've had this for a couple of weeks now. I've had to use Firefox, which is bizarre. It's better in Firefox than the people who make the actual plugin for the actual browser. And so last week I took Chrome off, I cleared everything out, I put it all back on again, I switched off all of my extensions, and it's still the same. So sort your act out, Google. Thank you very much. So for us now, please, I can't put my little banners up because Firefox doesn't let me do that, but we've got Twitter accounts that everybody else has had in front of them all evening, but I haven't. We have email, which is wonderofstuff@gmail.com. We've had a URL for a blog, which is wonderofstuff.blogspot.com. Please come, give us feedback. Tell us what we don't like, tell us what you like, ask us questions, and we'll answer them live on air. If you want to come on live, you can do that in Google Plus. You can post your question, and we'll try and answer it on air if we can. So until next time, I think that is all for this evening, and I hope you all have a smashing week. See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.